representation panel, or what was it called? The good, the
The
bad,
good, and the non-existent.
and the non-existent. We're going to talk about that today. So just to start off, just to give you some brief definitions, just to make sure everybody's on the same page with this. So we have aromantic, which just means does not experience romantic attraction with someone that doesn't. And then asexual being kind of the other side of the coin, although they can be completely separate in people, but asexual being does not experience sexual attraction. Those are totally separate, can occur at the same time, and also can be different with other like, allosexual or alloromantic orientations.
And allosexual and alloromantic just mean not asexual.
Not
Or
yeah.
not aromantic, yeah.
It's basically the same sort of thing as like cisgender and transgender. So cisgender is if you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, and transgender is you don't. So same sort of thing.
And then we also have gray spectrum on here. Do you want to?
Yeah, so like there can be a spectrum for both of those things because some people, they experience romantic or sexual attraction so rarely that they identify more with the asexual community than with the allosexual community. And that can get really fuzzy and people are still coming up with like definitions, but that's definitely something that a lot of people experience. So
Can everybody hear us okay?
Cool.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
All right.
So what are some asexual stereotypes that we can see through canon? So first let's talk about some, like what do we have in canon? Because we have so many, right? Like at least 5 is great. So for canon, so just recently, something that I'm super passionate about is that Jughead in the Archie comics has been made canonically asexual. That would be by Chip Zdarsky just this past year, and like not even a year ago, right?
Yeah, pretty much a year
Yeah, I
ago.
think it was
Yeah.
less than a year ago.
Yeah.
What's interesting with that one is that, so Jughead is the first legacy character, as I like to call him, who has been, like, an artist who's confirmed is asexual. So before we had the words for asexual and aromantic, there of course were still people who were that way. And so a lot of, those characters throughout history and fiction, or historical figures even, that like, looking at, if they're a fictional character, looking at their point of view, their thought process, that kind of thing, you can be like, wow, that sounds like they are asexual or asexual spectrum or aromantic. And with historical characters, like if they have, letters or diaries or anything like, you'd be like, wow, that's, you didn't have the word for it back then, but you're listing off the definition of these things. So it's really exciting that Jughead, who's a character who was just never interested in relationships, whereas the rest of Archie Comics really revolves around teen romance. It's really exciting to have somebody who works on it to just be like, yeah, we're going to do this. Like, we didn't have the word for it when Archie Comics started, but we do now. And since Archie Comics is something that, like they keep setting it in modern times now Jughead would use the word asexual. So in the comics, at least that's how it is. If you'd like to talk about Riverdale.
So Riverdale, if you're not aware, is the CW kind of remake / like rehashing of the Archie comics. So they just started it. I think they're almost done with season 1 though. But anyway, so they've got Jughead, who's played by Cole Sprouse, who was like one of the twins on like The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Anyway, like that's not important. But it is important that Cole Sprouse has been speaking out about like, it says asexual. Like this character should be portrayed as asexual. Like if they're not, that's erasure. That's bad. So kind of trying to be an ally to the community in that way. But CW is kind of just riding that line, just being like, he's still discovering himself, and like maybe that's our end game. Like we just have to let him get there. And I'm just like, CW, you better. CW, this is not okay. Like it's not okay to just be like, maybe like something that's like canonically queer. Just be like, but let's just. It's basically. It's kind of a form of queer baiting, like pretending that it's gonna be like, oh look, you're gonna get a queer character, but not exactly stating it, so that it's still the people that like might not be okay with queer characters, and people that might are still like you're basically pandering to every audience and no audience at the same time.
Because when they do, if Riverdale does, like if they use the word asexual on the program, they're gonna get so much flack for it. Because like every time there's an article about asexuality, like the comment section is always just like, why do we need words for these things? And like, people can't actually be asexual. So like, I totally get why the CW doesn't want to do that, because that's just a lot of drama.
But it's canon.
It's
But it's
yeah.
already canon,
If
though.
they didn't want to deal with that drama, they shouldn't have done the show.
Yeah.
it's
that's-
something that now comes with Archie Comics, is that you have to talk about that.
Yeah, and then now Cole Sprouse, like he is still like kind of trying to advocate to be an ally, but it's kind of becoming more of a thing where he has to kind of bow to the CW in this instance, and then he also kind of is trying to like even it out, like being like, I mean, like let's just let it happen. There was also one, I would say kind of problematic interview with him recently, like in the past couple weeks, where he seems to not understand the difference between like aromantic and asexual. It was so just like spoilers for CW. I know y'all are gonna go and watch it now, but so Jughead kisses Betty in like episode 6, I think. So then there's this thing of like, oh, he can't be ace because he's kissing someone, which is so false. But then the interview with Cole Sprouse seems to think that it's like an either or. Like it's like relationship with Betty or asexual, which I find also very problematic. Like because although the relationship is kind of against Jughead's like original character, where like in the original comics he does seem very aromantic as well and just
And also, it's
uninterested.
against Betty too, because the comics, I haven't read a ton of Archie comics, but the original comics were Betty and Veronica fighting over Archie.
Over Archie
That
the
was,
whole time.
That's the main
Yeah.
plot of the comics, as far as what I picked up, so.
But the CW loves drama, so
Anyways,
yeah.
so stereotypes. So Jughead is a bit different from other characters since he is a legacy character. Other ones we just generally, so there's Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman, who's sort of a childish and naive character. There's Raphael from City of Bones, which you're very familiar with that one, right?
Yeah, so Raphael from City Bones, he's like I'm not super familiar, but he's like the king vampire, like the main vampire person.
Yeah,
So we'll
so
talk about why that could be like
non-human.
bad for a couple of reasons, like
Yeah.
being non-human, and then he was also confirmed ace by the author outside of the work. She basically just like tweeted like, oh yeah, by the way, he's ace. Like, and while that is kind of a win for representation, it's not actually like applying it to the work itself. So that could be missed by a lot of people. So it's not, in a way, it's not much of representation, but yeah.
Back to stereotypes. So
Sorry.
there's also, so Voodoo from the police show Sirens is just kind of weird, which by itself it wouldn't be a problem, but there is this burden of representation since there are so few asexual characters that they all kind of have these things that are like,
Feel off about that.
yeah. And then we get to Dexter Morgan, who is not, I don't think they ever say that he's asexual in the show, but it's definitely like listed out as definition. He's a serial killer, so that's exciting. Then I'll let you do
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So then there's Breck, who's from the Imperial Roch trilogy, starting with the book Ancillary Justice. And there's actually two ace characters in that book. One is the main character, Breck, and one is a side character who's Medic. And Medic is human, so that doesn't fall into...
That's a decent one.
That's
yeah.
a decent one, but she's still a side character, so you don't see a lot of her. But Breck is non-human, being a anthropomorphized spaceship. It's a spaceship
It's a
inside a
trippy
human
book.
body. It's a really cool book. But anyway,
It's trippy, but it's cool.
there's also the stereotype of being emotionally detached or emotionally repressed, because Breck is an unreliable narrator, and it becomes very clear as you read the book that she is very out of touch with her emotions, because she'll be like, I didn't react, and then somebody who she's talking to will be like, I saw you crying, and it's like, okay. So that's a stereotype that ace people face, which is, you just aren't in touch with your emotions or your feelings or your body or whatever.
So still almost that non-human.
Yeah.
stereotype.
Yeah, and that's something that what I was talking about, like with comment sections and stuff like that, that is something that is very commonly comes up, is people will be like, well, if you don't experience sexual attraction, like, there's just something wrong with you, and like, you're like a plant, or like, there some people go with like frogs a lot too, which like, my roommate has frogs, let me tell you, they go at it all the time. Like, frogs are not asexual.
Photos are here.
Sure. Yeah, and then Herland.
Oh yeah. So and then there's also this book called Herland, which was published in like 1915, and it's a feminist utopian book, and all the female characters in it are basically ace, because they don't feel sexual attraction to anyone, and like their society is built on friendship, and it's really interesting, but the problem with it is that they are very that they are inexperienced, they've never had sex before.
What you're saying is like in the time period it was written, like lesbianism was not something that was acceptable to write about.
Yeah,
So,
or it was in the background of it that it was like, you know, maybe this author was trying to write more of like, I don't know, like at the time women were, if they had these really intimate relationships, it wasn't called lesbianism, whether they were sexual or not. And so you could argue that this is a society of lesbians that are, their sexuality is masked, or you could say, oh, it's an ace society. So, but either way, it's like they don't have sex in the book. There's no sex in their society, on the surface at least. And so that's another stereotype that's just like, you're just inexperienced, or there's not the right man around, or whatever. Or you're just a closeted lesbian.
Yeah, so as far as stereotypes go, generally like, there's some, with the majority of these characters, there's something about them that like, they're not the greatest of representations since there's so few. Like if there was a variety of representation, like this would be fine. I'd still probably take issue with the one who's a serial killer, but like the rest of them, like,
Yeah.
it's fine. It's just that there's so few that, especially since asexuality is not very well known, if somebody's first introduction to asexuality is through these characters, they might pick up whatever stereotypes or like ideas from these characters and start applying that to, you know, if then they see somebody else who like says that they're asexual or has an asexual pin or something like that, they'll automatically start associating those things with that person, even though, you know, that's not how it is for the vast majority.
So should we go to the?
Yeah.
All right. So as Jordan talks about rules, so I, with the help of a bunch of people, probably mostly my friend Tori, created these two rules that I think that mainstream media or like Hollywood in general seems to follow all the time that tend to be not quite that good. So we talked about the non-human rule. Either they're not human or they don't act human. Like so they're just this other thing like Spock, who is an alien, like has no emotions. Not canonically asexual, of course, but still like pretty like fitting with the stereotype of a lot of like the asexual kind of rhetoric that we get a lot of the time. And then Raphael from City of Bones, who is literally a monster, like is a vampire, whether or not he's a nice vampire, like it's still a thing. And then again, just from Star Trek Data, like being a robot, like just kind of asexual by default, like and just how that's like asexuals are robots because of the lack of representation. And Catherine was talking about this is like one of the like, main kind of things that we get a lot of the time. And of course, we already talked about Dexter being a human monster, still not very good. And then Breck being a spaceship.
Yeah.
So these are all things that are not, I don't know, they're all very diverse. We have diverse representation of really weird and not natural things.
Yeah.
But, and then the second rule being, I call it the children's media rule, or I thought of a really cool thing. It's the one or none. It is kind of the belief that just by default, all characters, like in any forms of children's media, are either asexual or demisexual. Demisexual being, it's the one, you know, being, does not, the actual definition being does not experience sexual attraction until like a strong bond is formed, usually an emotional bond. So that's kind of, I always think of that as like Disney princess, like that's what the media would have you say it is like, oh, it's just the one person. Just like, I need to find my one true love, like that kind of thing. So that can be kind of damaging to kids that are getting this told to them, like this is what love should be, first off, when like it's not. And then also when they start, if they ever start hearing about, you know, asexuality, demisexuality, like they'll associate it with this like kind of unnatural and unhealthy kind of relationship like to be built there. And then did you want to talk about adult views?
Yeah, so kind of like with the Disney princess thing, like, it's kind of complicated because, like, most of the Disney princesses are, like, 16 or so I'd say it's a good thing that they're not, like,
Sexualized.
having this, like, they're not sexualized, like, that's good. But yeah, it does still, like, create a really weird kind of thing of, like, how much so much is focused on the one. So, like, growing up, I thought that, like, demisexuality was the norm. I didn't know the word for it, but I just assumed, like, oh, like, nobody actually experiences, like, sexual attraction until like they find the one person that they do, because that was what was told me to be by media. And since I wasn't experiencing sexual attraction to anyone, I was like, oh, it's just, you know, there's that. And I imagine there's a flip side to people who are allosexual, is that like if they, you know, when they're growing up and starting to experience sexual attraction for the first few times, that would be really confusing, I would think, if like you've been told that like it's only like the one person that you have to marry. Like, I think that would just be a trip. Like, I thought it was weird myself, but like if we're on the flip side, I feel like that'd be even weirder. So it's, yeah, it's super complicated. But yeah, I'm glad that the majority of Disney princesses are not sexualized. But
And then just
it
on the
does-
other,
yeah,
on the other side of that, just people that are asexual or demisexual, yeah, just experiencing this and being like, oh, this is normal, and then discovering that it's not, and kind of feeling left out, like because of this representation, there isn't like a place for them, there isn't like that understanding. Like for me personally, like I also have like a similar story of like, oh, everyone's like this. Oh, everyone's not like this. What are they like? And then just having nothing there, you know, like having to kind of find out for myself. Like luckily I was able to like, find asexuality, but and much happier because of it. But that it took me a lot longer than it might have, like due to things like this, like our society telling me what was right, you know.
Anyway, so with that, kind of like with those rules, so we talked a little bit about how like non-human rule. So with that, some of those characters that we mentioned were more coded than canon. And there is a fair amount of coding. We talked about at the beginning how like, you know, without having the words for it, there's a lot of stuff, especially older media, where you look at the characters and you go like, okay, they don't seem to ever be interested in a sexual or romantic relationship. And there's a variety of like character types that go with that. So something that, you know, is a standard, and especially older media, like older Disney movies especially, is that like the villain characters are coded as gay in some way. You know, they're just really fabulous and like that kind of thing. And you do see that with asexual characters who are coded kind of asexual or romantic as well. So like villainistic coding, like, well, Dexter is one, like since it is a kind of canon. I kind of count them as canon and coding at the same time. But so like Voldemort from Harry Potter, you know, they say that J.K. Rowling said that he's not capable of like any type of love at all. So like that would therefore mean that he's aromantic, and that kind of association is just not so great. Another one that's not very good is like there's comedic coding. Even if you're not villainizing them for it, it's still like meant to be a joke. So Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, like there's lots of things wrong with how he's portrayed. He's also coded as autistic, and that's also seen as like a big joke. But one of like the major arcs of that show is that when he does get into a relationship with somebody, it's just like this big thing that always, it's so funny that he's in a relationship with this girl and he doesn't want to have sex with her though, and it's just constantly that it's funny. Like that's the point of it, is that it's funny.
She has to literally drive him
Yeah.
to have sex with her.
Which is just a really gross, weird situation.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of other things wrong with The Big Bang Theory, but that's just, you know, one more little check-off box of issues. And so then there's more ones that are more like neutral. So Sherlock Holmes from the original books, there's been so many different variations of him, but from the original sort of stuff, he's just generally cold towards most people, but he's not villainized for it. So I call that one neutral because him being cold is definitely tied into him not really being sexually or romantically interested in anyone. But he's not seen as a monster for it, especially. Like, people definitely are like, you're weird, but they're not like, you're awful. So that one's kind of neutral.
I would definitely say that's almost into the territory of non-human as well, though, because he does have this ability that nobody else
Yeah,
has.
That's true.
He's got these superhuman,
It's kind of-
like,
yeah, it's
cognitive
kind of-
abilities that
Yeah.
put him at a higher
He's
plane.
special.
Sort of.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
like that might be a separate category of non-human is even like superhuman.
superhuman.
Yeah, like, cause that's like, it's an offshoot of it, but like, yeah. And then there is occasionally positive coding, but those are the ones that are like the most hotly contested. So, like the original Star Wars movies, Luke's character arc, zero romance. Like Leia's after him, he's not having it. And like the whole story arc revolves on his familial and like friend relationships. Have no idea what they're doing with the new trilogy. We don't know what's going on there, but like his character arc ends with him in a very happy place without getting the girl, which is super weird for like 80s movies especially. So, there is occasionally, it's super rare, like that's really the only one I can think of that's like a very positive protagonist character who just, there's just no time in the story arc for it.
No time for them.
Yeah.
I really like that though, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There's
Yeah.
always something.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the most, like,
That's how the movie has to end, is like,
I mean, that's one of the most common ways that like any writer can provide conflict. Is just be like, a relationship. Like, yeah, let's throw a girl in here. It's great. Like,
only one.
only one,
Yeah.
no one.
Yeah.
Occasionally two, but
Yeah.
only one of them is the one.
Yeah. Yeah, and so with that, with the four people that I just talked about, so Luke, Sherlock, Sheldon, and Voldemort, I do think it's really interesting that like those are all white men, and part of that is just that a lot of those are older characters, and just in general, we are having more diversity of characters in all of media, but it is definitely with the stereotypes that there are for like there's a lot of stereotypes of people of color that they're either like hypersexual or they're desexualized, but not in a way that like really fits into this coding, because they're usually like the side characters when that's happening. So it is interesting that like we can't really come up with like any like legacy characters who are like definitively coded this way, good or bad. And I think that it just has a lot to do with that the majority of characters in fiction are white men. But there are, when in actual canon, there's a lot of like small media. If you go up to the Asexual Club table upstairs, there's flyers for a comic, Crash and Burn, which the main character is an asexual black woman, which is super rad. So like in the in the community created representation in like webcomics and stuff like that, there is a lot of like, it's a lot more diverse in terms of like race and gender, because Breck is non-white as well.
Yeah, Breck is a person of color.
Yeah, so the anthropomorphized ship occupies a human body, and like she is a person of color. But yeah, it's just sort of like in general, whenever there is a minority group that is starting to have some representation, it usually goes through the first majority group. It's the same sort of thing with, if you think about like all of the gay characters that are in fiction, the majority of them are cisgender white men. It's just how it is. But I do think that's important to note that that's something that people should think about. Yeah.
I think the thing with like webcomics and just like created, like just independently created things that have to do with asexuality or aromanticism, like it's definitely just the burden of representation again. We didn't see this, so we made it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's so strong. It's starting to become more mainstream, become more known. Like there are a ton of webcomics that I was just reading recently that deal with like very like, healthy asexual characters, which is very like even the, like romantic ones, that kind of thing. I can, like if anybody's interested, I can kind of just give you a list after.
There's also a list up at the Asexual Club table. We have a list of like
Oh yeah.
varying stuff, including a lot of webcomics.
Yeah,
So.
definitely just go up there and check it out. So do you want to talk about? So there's also potential damage of not labeling something as canon. So we did talk about how like authors that would confirm it like outside of the text, like outside of the original thing. So a lot of people might either miss that or just not really be as interested. So it's representation that is canon, but it's kind of still totally ignored. We have a couple other examples of like outside of canon. Sandry from Circle of Magic, it's a Timur Pierce books that also is outside of canon, but
Author confirmations, like the
Yeah.
author confirmed via website or Twitter or something like that.
yeah, like outside of the actual work, but it's canon. You're right.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty bad.
Yeah, because the problem is that with that is that it's just not as useful a representation if the author has to say it outside of the text. If it's not obvious within the text, it reaches fewer people.
Yeah, there's like with Breck and Medic from the Imperial Rauch trilogy, it was very like, it wasn't named as asexual in the text, but it was described, and then the author confirmed outside. But a lot of these ones, it's like it's not quite that close.
And it can be hard with like science fiction and fantasy because like, do you want to use modern terms for a society that like doesn't use the words their society uses anyways. Like if they have a different word for concrete, having a different word for sexuality is like that might be something that like it would break you out of the world. But I think there's still ways to do that. Like if you were to, you know, set like, I think the best, I thought about this a lot, and I think like the best way that I've come up about like way to do it would be to like keep the prefix and change the suffix. To like, you know, change the suffix to fit your setting, but keeping the prefixes the same will help people like connect the dots between like what things are supposed to be. But yeah, another one that was labeled outside of canon. So somebody had asked Rick Riordan, who writes the Percy Jackson and like all the other mythology books, if he was ever going to include like an asexual character. And he said that he saw the Hunters of Artemis as that way, which is something that I would agree with. Like when I was reading those books when I was young, there was like a solid week that I was sad that I couldn't actually go off and join the Hunters of Artemis because that'd be so rad, like girl gang for eternity. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it is, with legacy characters, it makes a bit more sense to confirm out of canon if like something's been written for a while. There was that one time, it was from DS9, there was a character and somebody was like, hey, like looking back on it, do you think like this would have been a good place to put asexual representation? And they were like, yeah, it would have been if we'd like had the words Rebecca. Who was that? Was that?
Oh, I think that was probably Odo.
That sounds right.
Yeah, Odo, he's another non-human character, but he was heavily coded as Ace for most of the series, and then there was like a couple episodes that really threw that out the window, but then the rest of them were, it's like,
so in a case like that where like, you know, the piece of media is finished, like they're not going to make more DS9, I don't have it, like, that seems fine to me if authors or writers are saying like outside of the text then, like, yeah, we didn't have the word for it back then, but we do now, you know, and yeah, we might have done things differently if we'd known the terminology for it. That's a bit different than like today, somebody publishing their book and then being on Twitter, oh hey, by the way, this person's asexual, congrats to me, aren't I great?
Just about just queer, like stuff like
In
that in
general,
general. Yeah, J.K. Rowling gets a lot of flack for saying just outside, like, oh, by the way, Dumbledore's gay.
Yeah.
Like, by the way.
By the
Like,
way.
so, whether or not it's in there, like, I would argue that it probably is in there. He definitely is gay, but,
yeah, like there's something,
but,
it wasn't ever explicit, like, and there was
Yeah.
a place for it too, like when there was all this stuff talking about Grindelwald, like, there would have been a place that you could have inserted something to indicate that they were partners at some point, of, you know, if they wanted to call it boyfriends or something, but they definitely, that's where you do see it as this in text, is with Grindelwald.
but because it wasn't explicit and because it was said, like, outside of the work itself, people have a lot more room to be like, okay, but are you just pandering? Like, are you just, oh, look, a queer character, you know? So that's definitely some of the flack that she gets for that. That's the majority of what we got.
Do you guys have questions?
Jinx?
Yeah.
Can you speak up, Trudy? Sorry.
oh,
the-
Verland, yeah, it was written in 1915 by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and it takes place on Earth, but it's in this like secluded place in some jungle on a mountain. I don't know, it's really weird, but what? No, see, and one of the problematic things about that book is that, because it is kind of racist, because all of these,
It's from 1915.
yeah, so like all the characters are white, even though they live in like the Amazon or somewhere like that. So it's not like the most
It's not the
pure
pinnacle
book.
of
Like, yeah,
representation.
but I found it very interesting. I was looking for different books that had ace coded characters, and I thought this was a really unique book because of how the whole society revolved around it. Different like concept of relationships.
Yeah, it's certainly really interesting from like an anthropology perspective, and then something that's really sad is that there are very few people in academics who are studying anything to do with asexuality. There's a few people who are going at it from like a biological perspective, but there's nobody who's like doing things like this, like looking at old books and being like, hey, you know, here's that, here's that. One thing that I found really interesting, so in high school we read the book The Lighthouse, and I don't know if any of you read it in high school. It's a pretty dry. But there's this one character in it, Lily Briscoe, and when I was reading it, we had to write a report about it, and my report was how about Lily Briscoe is this author's self-insert. Like, and you can just tell from like the way that she's writing it, like she just thinks this character is like so wonderful, and like it's if you've read fanfic, you know what I'm talking about when someone is just like, oh, you can tell this is you, right? So then when that was high school. At that point, I didn't know the words for asexuality at all, and it didn't come up to me. But later on, when I was Googling things about asexuality, and there was discussion of like historical characters like that was on the list, was Lily Briscoe. And this book was written by Virginia Woolf. I believe people say she's definitely some flavor of queer. Like,
Oh, definitely. She wrote a whole book to her female lover. And
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah, so like it's interesting that a character that like when I was totally, didn't know anything about asexuality, like as far as terminology goes, I pinpointed this character as being a self-insert of Virginia Woolf. I'd be interested to go back and read it again and read more about Virginia Woolf to see like if that view changes at all, but I just found that really interesting. And there's all sorts of like, it's sad to me that there's no one in academics really is doing much research on historical context, because there is a lot of stuff out there. And even though asexuality, like the term for it, has really only picked up in mainstream since like the dawn of the internet, there were people throughout history who were using the term asexual because, if you have heterosexual and homosexual and bisexual, and you want to say not experiencing sexual attraction, if you are somebody who is good with words, asexual would be kind of one of the first conclusions that you come to. So, yeah, there's a lot of research to be done, but there's not anyone doing it. So if any of you are humanities majors, there's a project for you.
I see looking at me and I told you I wouldn't do it.
Yay.
If you're interested in looking at that Herland book, I have a copy on my table on the second floor.
What is it called again?
Herland.
Berland? Okay, I just wrote it down. It's like that book with no end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting.
It's hard to find because it's out of print. So that's why
I'm really surprised that it's not like super popular in like gender studies classes, because that's so
Yeah,
weird.
it
A
should
book
be.
for 1915 being all women, like that's
yeah.
weird.
And
Like-
I read the foreword, and the woman who wrote it, her life was so fascinating. She was definitely like, I can't imagine being in her shoes at that time and like having that identity that she had, because she had such different, feelings about relationships and gender and all of that.
Yeah,
than
and
most people.
at that point, you weren't allowed to have feelings about relationships. It was you got married, you popped out kids. Like there was no,
Yeah,
there was no
she had a
choices
whole
here.
crisis about
Yeah.
marrying a guy and having a child, and actually had a mental breakdown because of it. And then she ended up writing a bunch of stuff. So it was really interesting.
Any other questions?
Just one question. You were talking earlier about trying to bring in the idea of asexuality into like a fantasy world,
Yeah.
where you might not have a terminology. You said keep the prefix but drop the suffix. And I guess I didn't actually quite
Yeah.
get what that
Yeah,
meant.
change the suffix. So like, if like in your fantasy world, you call, I don't usually read a lot of fantasy. I read a lot of sci-fi. So like, they don't call it concrete. They call it like duracrete, or like they don't call it glass. They call it transparent steel. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So like, if it's something like that where like you don't have like earth words, like if you could come up with something like,
If you don't have words for sexual, like keep
yeah.
the A, because A meaning
Oh,
black.
Yeah,
okay.
keep the
So just
A and the
make it
hetero
clear.
and the bi,
Yeah.
and then put like change your own, like add your own suffix that fits something that like shows like alignment to that.
Or I mean, like if you have a language that is in your world that has certain prefixes and suffixes,
Yeah.
then it can be implied through that text as well.
Or something that I try to do, like with my writing, if I don't want to like use a label or use that kind of thing, is just make it explicit. Like the character, like why are you like this? I don't know. I just don't feel that way about people. Like, oh, that's a thing. And then so even if it's not like stated like directly like asexual in there, even if it is then gone by the author behind the scenes and being like, this character is asexual. It's like, oh yes, I see
Yeah.
directly why this is true. So it's
Yeah.
not like, but are they? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what happened with Breck and Medic, was that people were like, is this character because they say this in the text, they say, I don't think medic is into that kind of thing, then the author said, yeah, of course, I had that in my mind when I was writing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's a bit like author confirmation in that context is like, I'm willing to give that more of a pass if it's just like you couldn't figure out how to use the term because you're in space or you're in, you know, fantasy world Narnia, you know, because I'm sure Narnia would just have tons of queer representation. But yeah, like if you can't make the term fit, that's a bit different than like, you know, if Chip Zdarsky like wasn't using the word asexual in the Jughead books, because like that's something that is
There's no reason.
there's no reason not to, and he is using it, so that's good. Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah. Any others? Yeah.
Was a question, just more of a comment. You guys mentioned how Claire only preferred Raphael as ace on Twitter, which I didn't know when I was reading the books, but the new TV series they're doing, which has its problem. It's not great, but I love it anyway.
Yeah.
Raphael is, like, he talks about being ace. He doesn't use the
How-
word, but from what I recall, that he does specifically talk about it in the context of having a romantic partner.
Cool.
Sweet.
And I'm glad that's in the context of having a romantic partner rather than the context of being a vampire.
Yeah.
Because if it was like, oh, I'm a vampire, I can't feel sexual attraction. Like, that'd be really bad compared to like, oh, I'm in this relationship. Yeah, so that's good. That
He's
it's
like involved with somebody and she wants to, she tries to initiate things with him. He's just like, hang on, I don't do that in that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
Excellent. Yes, Trinity.
I just have to say, I don't know if you guys know this, but vampires, like the whole deal of why they're so popular is because sucking blood is like the euphemism for sex. So like to have an asexual vampire is just extremely strange to me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so that's like the vampires is for sex.
I could see that. Yeah, I mean, they're forever young with the chiseled chests and the.
That's so new. Because like
True.
old school vampires, like they had like Christopher Lee playing a vampire, and like I'm not a good judge of what's sexy, but I'm sure. Like no offense, may he rest in peace, but like.
Bela Lugosi. Ooh, that sounds pretty sexy right there.
Yeah.
Black and white.
So, one of the big pieces of media that people maybe see the term asexuality is House. Do you want to talk about
Oh yeah, let's talk about House. So, yeah, House. So if you're not familiar, it's almost a variation on Sherlock Holmes, which makes this even more offensive. Since as we've talked about, like Sherlock is kind of a neutrally coded asexual character. There is an episode where it's a medical show, so like it's problem of the week kind of thing, and somebody comes in and is identifying as asexual, and so is their partner. And House is just like, no, like that's not a thing that people are. And the episode progresses, and eventually it turns out that the person who was identifying as asexual had like a brain tumor.
Some sort of,
Yeah,
some sort of
some
like serious medical condition that made them
made them stop
Low
experiencing
libido.
low libido, which is, side note, like it's separate, like
Yes.
libido and sexual attraction can be separate things. So it turns out that they had a brain tumor, and that's why they were identifying as asexual. And then their partner was like, well, I was just saying it because you were saying it.
just
And,
pretending.
like,
Oh, no.
just pretending. And
Yeah.
like that's the moral of the episode is
Yep.
that asexuality doesn't exist.
It's either medical or it's pretending.
Yeah,
Those are the two options. Thanks, House. Like,
yeah,
not good.
yeah. I'm surprised we didn't, I guess we've all just like blocked that. from
I
our memories
tried.
and just,
I
like,
know, I
thank
remembered
you.
that,
Thank
I
you.
remembered that, and then I just totally just
Yeah.
made myself forget. because
Yeah.
it was so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Not good. Not good.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?